Good afternoon.
Hi, Elliot. We can see you. Can you hear us?
Yupper. Hope you guys are enjoying lovely San Francisco. I guess Alexis gets to do that a lot.
Okay, we don't seem to be hearing you. Let me see. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep talking for a little bit until you can hear me. Once upon a midnight dreary. Let's see here, just a moment. Okay, Karsten can hear me. That's good.
Yeah, right. That was funny to ask.
Right. Is anybody working on this?
Elliot, start talking again. We've got somebody on the board here.
Okay, hello, how's it going? Can you hear me? Still nothing, huh?
No, we hear you now.
All right, okay. Good afternoon. I will mute myself now that you can hear me.
but not off the top of my head. I think IESG is currently first. IESG, IEB, then LLC. Yes.
I don't have that kind of shit. I mean, I can make a choice so you're not sitting there alone.
Miria, Lars, and Colin.
Other than that, we're fine.
Whoa, big crowd. Hello. Miria was just giving a presentation and has a bunch of people that urgently want to talk to her about it. I'm not the caller, but here's the MOE. I have to deal with.
Just to be clear, Lars, like we can't hear you on the, on Meet
Sorry,
Echo.
yeah, I didn't speak into the mic, and this mic is not doing anything. Can you hear me better now?
Yep.
Yeah, you can. Okay, so maybe it's just the in-room that doesn't work. Okay, so we'll use this one. I was just apologizing for Miria because she had a presentation and has a bunch of people that want to talk to her.
Yeah, okay.
Cindy, do you want to start anyway, or 'cause I don't want to guess when she might be able to come.
Yeah, maybe we can get going for attendance. We're missing Miria and Colin, so hopefully they will join us. Any other changes to the agenda? This is split into two parts. The first part is explicit RSAB business, and then after that there will be a second session that is stream managers plus the RFC production center, sort of combining this into one meeting because it's mostly the same people. Robert mentioned that he had a bit of stream manager business that he would like to take at the very beginning of that part of that section. Any other changes to the agendas? The QR code is currently hidden, but you can sign into it from the agenda in the data tracker. Okay, so if there's no agenda bashes, the next thing on the agenda is document approval. There is nothing there, so we will move on to the.
Actually, so just for information, everybody has seen this, right? But Eric Rescorla is stepping down as co-chair of the RSWG, and the ISG is replacing him with somebody. And at the moment, we're in the feedback period for the candidates. So that's been announced. If you have feedback on the candidates, please send email.
Okay, so with that, then the next topic on the agenda is where RSAB keeps its records.
Yeah. Any problem with this? You need to use the mic.
Sorry, the only problem with this one is that Miria's got some views on it, so we have her here. But in essence, I'm simply suggesting that we use data tracker as it was intended to be used, rather than to create too many external systems of ourselves. Robert's got the details of what we can keep in data tracker relatively straightforwardly, and I'm just proposing we do that. So it's not everything, it's just some things that I think are better held in there.
So we already have things set up to where ballots on documents, if anything ever comes out of our SWG, are captured in the data tracker. We have, I'm sorry. We have a work that I'm doing now to capture ISG and IEB statements in the data tracker, and we could capture RSAB statements exactly the same way. Those would not get balloted, so that balloting of those things could go into the minutes. If we want to add balloting of statements in general to the data tracker in the long run, like what we just, the decision that we made.
Wouldn't that just be minutes from the meeting rather than like a statement?
So this is started with the conversation that Miria had me send an email a couple months ago about a possible wiki, and it was just to have a place to have all of the decisions in one place rather than having to comb through minutes for them.
Oh, okay. So basically just have a list of.
Okay. Yeah. So that's why I'm thinking maybe
so
we use this.
Would be the wrong term, but decisions or something like that. But yeah, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. We can use the same mechanism. We just call it something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm personally in favor of using the data tracker rather than having a wiki, which always tends to like fall behind in terms of getting updated. But maybe we'll come back to this when the area shows up.
Yeah, having a wiki to keep things like, what time people are arriving for a particular meeting, sure, but
Elliot, what are your views on this as the other stream owner who's here? You're muted.
That was my fault. I was going to say, Lars, I'm sort of easy on this one. I like the idea of keeping things in the data tracker so long as there's a way to consolidate a view of decisions that we're making and statements that we're making. Those are my parameters. If we can get that, then that's great.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we tentatively have rough consensus of minus Colin and Miriam. We'll see what we get from them.
My suggestion is we just confirm it on the list.
Sure. I mean, there was some need for discussion, which is why we put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Not to speak for Miria, but from having previous conversations with her about this, I don't think it had occurred to either of us that the statements thing that you're working on would be a place to do this, but I'm guessing that she would be fine with that because she's also pro moving stuff to the data tracker. So.
Okay.
I guess that takes us to other business. Yeah, because the next things are explicitly stream manager, and we're missing 2 of the stream managers. So I don't know if we can actually.
Let me ping them.
Hey, Cindy, could you flash the stream manager agenda?
Elliot, while you're reading, I will ask you the question I intended for other business. It sounds like I'll just need to ask stream managers as applying them ad hoc. The ISG would like for me to change the data tracker so that individuals can't post a new revision of a draft once it's been approved and is in the stream, that they would have to ask the Secretariat to do a manual post instead. I would like to find out if I should just do this across all the streams.
For background, right, this is based on a request from the RPC because they've seen a spike in revisions that authors are pushing in after something is ISG approved. And we don't quite know why this is happening, but it's like 2 to 3x compared to last year.
Specifically, it would be when something is in the RFC editor queue, right? If
Yeah.
the RFC editor may have started work on it already.
Yep. I'm fine with that. Good idea.
The other business I might want to have is sort of ask Pete as the RSWG chair in the room, what do you think might come from them to us first or next? Or do you have a guess, or is it too hard to tell before you met?
The short answer is it's too hard to tell. The slightly longer answer is the only thing truly in the pipeline is the XML document at the moment, which is a problem in and of itself. That's the only thing in the pipeline. So one of the agenda items on RSWG today, Thursday, is how to get things unstuck, moving, what needs to be done to make that happen. Miria and I just had a conversation yesterday about sort of strategies that might involve more help from the chairs. Yeah, I don't have any great answer for you.
All right. We had sort of started, but we talked a little bit about the where do we keep records discussion, but let's go maybe back to that now that Miria is here. I think Colin too, but I haven't heard from him. because I think the sort of, at least sort of Elliot and I, so basically the data tracker will have functionality to not only show minutes, but also have a list of decisions that can
Yes.
be presented.
And that should be in the data tracker. What I was talking about is just having a little bit of scratch space where we kind of organize our internal procedures. That means like writing down somewhere how we come to a decision, because currently the only place where we have written this down is in an email. And the other thing is also how we select the chair. That's also something we only have written down in an email. So at the end, this would be mostly for, I think, Cindy, making sure that we have documented what our procedures are.
And that should not be in a data tracker?
That's something that we kind of traditionally don't put in the data tracker. I don't think the ISG, the IB, or anybody has it in a data tracker. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the data tracker, because it's more for our internal consumption than for the external community.
I think the main reason why the other bodies haven't done it is because the data tracker was a much different animal back then than it is now.
Would you move all your wiki stuff from the ISG into the data tracker?
No, but this is a new group that's starting now, and I think we should just like use the best tooling we have available at the moment.
But we have a wiki, right? And like if you want to have something where people can easily access and change it, then the wiki is the right approach.
I mean, I guess it boils down to this, if you don't mind my asking, which is if the data tracker can support, essentially the creation of a process, various process files, and essentially a centralized place to show all that fun stuff, including decisions, it essentially is a wiki as far as I'm concerned. But if it can't support it, maybe we need a wiki. Again, I'm not. This is not. If this is our toughest problem, life's pretty good.
At the moment, I guess it is. So I think that our decisions should really go in the data tracker, because that's something that is for the community consume, and it should be easy to find there, right? But everything else, no. I don't know what's the concern about setting up a wiki. As I said, I think the wiki will be mostly used by Cindy.
Run out of disrepair. It's sort of if we look at the ISG wiki, right, and all the crap that's on there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, what's the problem about it? Like as long as there's still something useful on there, it's fine.
Over time, anyway, I think if we can use the data tracker for everything, we should. I'm not gonna like complain anymore, but I think it's overkill to have a wiki for like 2 things.
Why? Wiki is really cheap.
It needs to be maintained.
Yeah, but that's why we have secretariat support.
But then let's put it on a Google Doc or something, right? Anyway.
That is kind of much more of a mess from my point of view. I really don't understand what the concern about a wiki is. Sorry.
It's another thing that isn't the data tracker that we need to maintain for this group for like 2 pieces of information.
Yeah, but the wiki is there. You have an account. There's like
it would be a new wiki instance, because it's gonna have
no.
It's gonna have.
Okay, that's actually something we should discuss.
It has role-based write restrictions for this particular new corner of it, right?
Yeah, but the roles are in the data tracker, and the data tracker login is used in the wiki. So we actually, the original question was, do we want to create a wiki that is maintained by the RFC editor, or do we want to use the IETF wiki? And I think that one, I wouldn't want to do that, because for the IETF wiki, everything is there. We have the credentials, we can just use it. That's easy. And I think, and like, I have no concerns about it, because we're also using the data tracker, which is also an IETF resource, right?
Can we try the data tracker and see if it works?
Where do you want to put it?
Under the RSAB. We're a group, right? There's tabs on the top. There's going to be a list of decisions that we're taking that are there. There's the membership is there. And we're going to have a page with procedures, if you want to call it.
So you want to create a wiki in the data tracker?
It's not a wiki. It's not a wiki. It's basically a thing where you can put information. It's a field. It's a field of the model or something.
Robert, do you have anything to add to this?
The nature of the material that Miria is championing so far is pretty static, and something like that we could put into the data tracker as a field. If it's something just the secretariat like looks at and updates every couple of years, then tying it into the data tracker makes sense. If it is dynamic data that's changing every meeting, that people are trying to keep updated, and multiple people need to be editing it to make it right, then yeah, go use a corner of the wiki. Using the corner of the IETF wiki is fine. Don't get too balled up in access rights. You know, the fact that some other random IETF person could come in and do graffiti on your wiki. Well, you know, that's what a wiki is.
Yeah, I mean, the other use case for wiki would be to create our agenda instead of also doing it on the main list, but like that's not an urgent use case.
I actually prefer that to be either an iCal or an email.
No, the items on the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah. Currently we use email, but it's like
I'm already never looking at the existing wikis. Right?
so the final agenda goes in the data tracker because that's where the meeting is announced. But like creating the agenda, giving the people the ability to add stuff to the agenda.
I will say from experience with the IAB that people rarely add stuff to the wiki, and they're more likely to do it over email anyway.
Yeah. So that means we want a tool request to the data tracker to get us an additional tab. We have it. Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, we can do that now. So.
That's fine. Any other business? We did a little bit of any other business already, but is there anything that you have on your mind that we should
I'm not sure. No, I'm just looking. I'm just looking that we don't have. So like, I'm not sure we want to talk about it, but maybe something to keep in mind is that this question about what's policy comes up very often, and maybe that's also a question that we need to consider at some point. But I don't think I want to discuss it now.
I think Pete Resnick has some views on that and wants to bring that into the RSWG, and I think we should wait for them to sort themselves a little bit on that.
It's a little bit in the sort of if I know it if I see it category, right? But there's also the other wrinkle is that people mix up policy for the RFC series with policy for the IETF stream a lot, right? And the IETF stream is under the auspices of the IASG, and so are the other streams. They have their stream managers, right, or stream owners. So that's I think a bigger point of confusion.
So I think okay, like the question is very general, but the reason why I bring it up is because I think it's at the moment it's very hard for the RPC to figure out if they have a problem, to figure out is it policy question, is it not, is it more practical, where do we need to go, who do we need to ask, because it's all very unclear, and that's something that we need to get better over time. But maybe we just get better over time when we get more experience with it.
I think the RPC can raise it with ISAP or with the chairs, for example, and just informally ask, what do you think? And then it'll go to the community, right? The only other thing is then the ISAP would need to make it like production related with decision if it's something urgent. Otherwise, it would, if it's policy, then go to the RSWG, and if it's a thing that's just related to one stream, it would go to that stream.
So, but that's actually kind of the advice I've been trying to give, and let me see if that's actually what you want to give, is that whenever they have a problem and they're not sure about where to go, they can always come to RSAP first, and we will give them also advice where to go.
The RPC.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
So like RSAP is the first contact point for everything, and they shouldn't be shy.
Doesn't need to be. I mean, they can also talk to Pete, right?
No, I mean, if they are sure where they want to go, but like I think there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment that they don't know where to go, and then they might not go anywhere. So
do we have an example of a question? I'm sort of having a hard time speaking about this in the abstract.
So I thought that the discussion about the hyperlinks was a good example of something that is on the list.
But okay.
Microphone, please.
Sorry, it's on now. I was saying I think the discussion that Alexis had on the list about the archival links is a good example of like point of confusion, right? Is it policy or is it not policy? And a lot of what I saw on that list was it's policy if we say it's policy. So it's and support for that view. So it's hard to figure out like where that line is.
Yeah, and it also depends on how you phrase it, right? So I would say that the question whether RFCs should strive to have links that are of archival quality, i.e. that they don't 404, I think that's a policy question. How we implement that, like whether we link to archive.org or something else, or we snapshot the webpage ourselves, I think that is implementation, right? And that's also something that clearly isn't per stream, so it doesn't fall into that bucket.
So, but again, like the question was about the general problem, because I think this discussion started on RFC interest, because like I think you were assuming there's no policy question involved, and then it kind of dripped over into RSWG. Because there might be a policy question, and then like you also had the feeling that you want to discuss it with the stream interest, right? So it's like it's just bubbling around everywhere.
So I went to RFC
Okay,
interest to see what people had to say about it,
Yeah.
because it's a wider group, and it feels like a shift, right? Kind of a general shift. Once I had gathered that information, then I took it to RSWG because I was not clear which parts of this were policy and which weren't. And the kind of resulting conversation wasn't particularly clear to me about what, you know, some people were saying, you know, like people had lots of conversation about 2 of the 3 points in particular. Lots of conversation about implementation. I don't know which levels of implementation are considered policy, right? So if for example, linking to the Internet Archive instead of PermaCC, instead of our own version of whatever, if we consider that to be policy versus implementation, I can totally see that somebody might consider that to be policy. So that's why I did it that way. I don't know if it was the right way necessarily, but
I'm not saying it's right or wrong or
Yeah.
whatever. It's just like we don't know what the right way is, so that's
Right.
a confusing part to me.
But sorry, implicit in going to the RSAB first, though, is the idea that the RSAB can decide what is policy and what isn't, and I don't think it can. Only the RSWG can, and so that's why Alexis has to go through that route that goes to the RSWG. I mean, I think a more, and I don't mean to be critical, Pete, but I think perhaps more efficient RSWG process where we could eliminate what is, what isn't policy would suit quite as well. But I don't think we can come to the RSAB and say, is this or isn't this policy? It's
I
not.
don't think that's true.
So
because
hang
I
on a
think
second,
like-
guys.
Okay.
This was contemplated in the enabling document that we have, right? In which the RPC has a set of governing policies and RFCs today. If the RPC has a question as to its authority to act, then it can ask the RSAB about that, right? We may not be, this is most specifically around particular RFCs, but I wanted to turn that around and say, I think it's fair for the RSAB to ask the RPC, are there activities that you are blocked on because of where or you perceive you have a lack of authority? And if so, what are they and what is the impact? And if we can sort of set them up and knock them down that way, it might, what we can't, the RSAB may not be able to solve the problem, but we can at least help you maybe rephrase the problem to the RSWG. Sometimes we might be able to solve the problem if there's a way to interpret, if we're allowed to interpret the rules in a specific case, like if there's a document in question, for instance. I don't know if I'm being very clear, but that's my intent.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I think this point that Jay made, we can't decide about policy is not true, because when it's clearly in the model that if there's a question where it's not clear, we actually have to make a decision about, does it need a new policy, for example? Do we need to bring it to the RSWG or whatever? So these are all implicit questions about, is there policy or not?
So I don't think this is our decision to make, in the sense that, so if a production related thing arises, right?
So we have to make the decision, because it's like, first of all, if there's any problem, we first of all have to decide, is there policy? Is this a policy? And if there's a policy, is there an RFC that gives guidance about it? And then we can give guidance back. And if there's no RFC, then we should bring it back to the RSWG.
Turning
But
the
like,
model around.
nine, I don't know.
The RSAB is the approval board for things coming out of the RSWG. We're not the.
No, but there's a second
this is the
function.
work you
No,
do,
there is
deciding
no, there's a second function in that we are helping the RPC to interpret RFCs. And when we're doing this, we have to decide about, is this policy or not.
But if we interpret RFCs, it's not about whether something is policy or it's like, what does this mean? What does this text mean? Right?
Yeah,
In
but
terms
it's
of
then
production
there's also the case
review
where
process.
there might be something missing, where there might be a policy missing. We bring it back to the RSWG,
Yes,
and that's the
but
point
that-
where
that-
we, where we have to say to the RPC, actually there is a policy here, so you have to bring it to the RSWG, or we have to say to them, there's no policy here, it's your own implementation decision, you should just go ahead.
So Pete had his hand up, but I also have something I want to say after Pete.
I love quoting chapter and verse. Section 2. If issues arise with the implementation of particular policies, the RPC brings those issues to the RSAB, which interprets the policies and provides interim guidance to the RPC, informing the RSWG of those interpretations. So here's my gut as one of the chairs here. If the RPC says, we're not clear whether there is or is not a policy on what we're thinking of doing, that's something to bring to the RSAB. The RSAB can say, there's no bloody policy on this. We have no interpretation. I hope for the most part that's not the answer that's given. I hope for the most part the RSAB might say something even if there was no specific policy. Well, in general, the RPC is allowed by current policies to do X, Y, and Z, and off you go. But if you think that's not clear, the RSAB will bring that to the RSWG and say, you guys need to be clear on this because we are interpreting the absence of a policy as they are allowed to go forward and do this, or they can't do that. So in terms of sort of the order of how this would go, I would hope that the RPC comes to the RSAB makes a decision about whether there is in fact a policy, not whether some particular thing is a policy, but whether there is policy that covers the RSAB's advice to the RPC. And if there's a gap, then the RSAB comes to the RSWG and says, we've got a gap here because we can't give a reasonable interpretation to the RPC.
Case, right? So if there is policy, then we have to like interpret this policy. If there's no policy, there's a question of like, is that even a space where policy makes sense, or is it just an implementation decision? And that is also feedback we can give to the RPC.
So I think the current document is relatively silent on this, on the is there policy there or not gap. If it's the view of the RSWG that the RSAB can make a decision on that, I'm comfortable with that.
No, but the problem I'm trying to solve is that I want to make sure things work, right? And that means the RPC needs to know what to do. And like, I believe it's easier for them to like come to one body and get some guidance and then move to the next body, rather than for each thing they have a question on, they just like having endless discussion about what to do next.
So can I re-say back what I think you're suggesting, which is that if I or anybody has something that they want to bring, I don't know, anybody, the RPC, I'm not clear, has an idea that they think is probably could be policy, they should come to RSAB first, ask RSAB to make a decision about whether they think there is already policy or it is something that should be taken to the RSWG, and then and only then go to the RSWG?
No,
is that the suggestion?
No. So like, I don't want to restrict the RPC to do anything they want to do, right? So if they are clear that they need a policy and so on, they can directly go to RSWG. I just want to like solve this case where there's confusion, where it's really not clear what to do. And in this case, I actually want to welcome the production center to always come to RSAB, initially have a discussion here, and not be shy about it, basically.
Yeah, and my concern about the discussion, we should just be careful about how we have these discussions, because they can get a little too abstract. And I think what would be helpful is as we go into Prague in particular, um, it would be good if the RPC just could provide us, a list of, and I say us as as RSAB, and it doesn't have to just be RSAB. You can say this to the RSWG too. A list of activities that you think are suffering due to a lack of decision or a lack of authority on your part. If there are specific activities around that that you want to undertake and you feel you can't undertake, or you feel you don't have the authority, or you have a question as to your authority, then I think you should just bring those forward. You don't even have to wait till Prague. Just bring them forward specifically. That allows us at the RSAB to do the research to determine an answer in an interim way, and allows the RSWG to decide to make a decision. And the RSWG's decision output is an RFC, right? Or something that heads towards us towards an RFC. So I think if that will get us out of the abstract and into the specific. So let me give it. I can drill down a little bit more if you want in terms of how this might apply in the case, say, of archival links, the discussion that was there, if you want, or something like that. But maybe I'll just stop and because I've been talking for a little while.
Yeah, I think that's a good proposal. I'm hoping you're taking still something away from this discussion. But effectively, what we're saying is we continue this and get more experience about it. That's okay. Sure.
So, and I would say when it is crystal clear to you all that there's a policy gap, coming to the RSWG makes sense.
Yep.
That's perfectly reasonable.
I mean, obviously,
the
there was
thing,
no policy in place
right,
for this.
but the
right?
thing with archival links was interesting because there were questions about what was policy, what wasn't policy, what could be done without approval, what couldn't be done without approval. And I think the RSAB might be a good first step to sort of at least tease out, okay, look, these things you can do under current policy, and so off you go if you want to do those. If you want to wait, these things need policy. Clearly, we can't, as RSAB, approve you doing that without there being a written policy. So maybe let's either they or you go to the RSWG and say, hey, this is where we need some more guidance from you all.
Okay.
I think what happened in the archival links discussion, nice little feedback there. What happened in the archival links discussion is, of course, as soon as the question is so broad as you guys might need to do something here, figure it out. Of course, that introduces a level of mayhem into RSWG because it's the whole community. And so we had a little trouble kind of focusing in on that discussion. So I think turning the loop backwards for these kinds of questions is probably worth it.
Okay.
And by the way, the Unicode decision and discussion was a perfect example of how things went well, in my opinion. I mean, it was a little bumpy at times, but it really went smoothly. The RPC prepared a really good question for us with good research, good pointers, and we could take it from there. It was great.
Yeah, but I think that's the easy case. There was an RFC which was unclear. That's exactly what we're supposed to do. I have a minor side question because you said the RFC interest mailing list is just reaching more people of the community. Is that actually true? Do we know that?
I don't know. I guess
Okay.
I thought from the context that
Yeah,
it would be.
it makes
but
sense, but maybe something we should look
Yeah.
into. Okay. But I think at this point we're actually, if there's not any other business, we're actually closing the RSAB meeting. So thank you for that part of the meeting. And we're moving on to the second part.
You want to keep bystanders out for a second?
I think you should.
Okay.
Yeah. Colin, if you could listen. So the ISG has asked that I change the data tracker so that the submission endpoint will not accept new revisions from a person automatically if the document is already in the RSC editor queue. But if there's a reason for such a thing to happen, it should come through the Secretariat as manual post.
So I was going to ask if I should just do this for all streams.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer, to answer the question, RFC Interest has 398 subscribers, RSWG has 48 subscribers.
Okay, interesting.
That's interesting.
Which is not to be part of our, which is no different than the RSAB.
Can't hear people.
Mike was saying that he thought that this meeting was open and that this part was part of the RSAB meeting. And I tried to clarify that this is a meeting that we've always had, and it's about production-related issues between the streams and the RPC.
Okay.
Also, the stream owners are not necessarily the same people as the RSAB. They are currently, but that's not a requirement.
It's not open.
Okay, I would just ask if we could get going, though.
You're very loud. He was asking whether we can keep going, and I think we can now. And I expect we're gonna have Mike speak up in RSWG about this.
That's a universal statement, by the way, Lars. I am very loud.
Okay, who runs this part?
I think this is us.
All right.
All right, so if we just move to the next one. This one is somewhat what we covered at the IESG yesterday. Oh, sorry, not yet. We really wanted to hear from the streams. If you have any issues that are related to the RPC, or if there's anything that we should be aware of or that you would like to discuss. And if there's anything upcoming that we should be aware of. So for example, large clusters that are inbound or anything like that. Can we just go around the streams and hear if there's anything?
Nothing from my side.
I don't see any large clusters. We had a bunch of telechats in the last half year that were pretty light, and it looks like that has sort of reversed, and then now again pretty full. So you can expect the usual stream of like 400 pages or whatever. So that's likely going to happen.
Can't hear Colin.
He doesn't have a mic, but there's nothing.
Okay. Yeah, on the independent side, first, my thanks to the other streams for accommodating the fast processing of RFC 9446, and thanks to the RPC for that. I hope that there can be some discussion. We'll try and drum things up a little bit in IAB Open and in the HRPC about that. From a perspective of upcoming efforts, I have no concerns about anything that's been done, just compliments. Upcoming stuff from the independent stream, we're not moving at a brisk pace. We have a couple of documents that are going to come through to you guys. I think the IESG has 2 or 3 documents right now. I think maybe 2 that are in front of you, maybe. And I'm expecting maybe another 3 or 4 by the end of the year. And so from an RPC standpoint, I don't think you'll see more than 3 documents from me between now and November at least, and maybe that'll be the entire year, depending on the authors.
Okay, great.
One of
Thanks
those
for
is
that.
good.
Okay, so the next slide is just showing where we are with submissions and publications. So on track for similar numbers to the last few years. Nothing surprising, I don't think. And then moving on to the next one. We talked with the ISG a little bit about this, the first one, clusters. If you have a cluster coming in, it would be really helpful if you provide the order in which they should be numbered. Current process is we read through the documents, try to figure out based on the references what the reading order should be or the dependency order. And sometimes it's not correct. So it's really helpful if you can provide that information up front. And just adding it, sending us an email or putting it in the document action itself is either way is fine, whatever's easiest. The next point here is what Robert already discussed, so I think we can just skip over that one. And possibly we skip over this one also. So what was working well, the example that we had was the same as what Elliot pointed out was we thought that the way non-ASCII characters was handled was a pretty good example of how the model is supposed to work. We've been taking things to RPAT to work things out and get some input about how things can work or how they can be fixed. And the area of concern is what we already discussed, which is that the lines between policy and operation can be fuzzy. So I think, from our point of view, it's just to say that we consider things more thoroughly. Like we think about, we don't just assume something is operational these days, right? Like we have to give it a little bit more thought, and it takes a little bit longer for us to figure out what the right venue is. And so what I'm hearing is ask, when those questions come up, ask, and that's fine.
And just to comment on this slide, if you present this in the next meeting, please, I think it should go into the RSAB meeting.
Okay. I would like to hear from you though. Are there other areas that you think are working well or that?
So a quick reaction to what you said earlier. So I actually think you absolutely should assume that you know what's operational and what isn't. Because otherwise, if you bring these gray area things to the broader community, you get more conversations like we just had on archival links, right? So because even if you ask about something that's clearly operational, you're still going to get feedback.
Right.
So in RSWG.
Well, I guess, really to me, that is the hard part, is that they have said on that list, right, that it's policy if we say it's policy, and there was support around that.
Sure,
thought.
but no consensus has been called on this, and anybody can say whatever, and people have strong opinions are all over the place.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I agree with that.
You're the RPC, right? If you don't know what operational is, the community will certainly not know what operational is.
So there's one more point to the RSWG is chartered to write RCs, right? So if there's a policy, the only thing they can do is write an RC or write a draft and then have a discussion about this draft. If nobody is writing it up, then they should not really discuss it. Like, of course, there's a pre-discussion, but at some point somebody has to say, okay, I know what I need to write, I write it up, and then they can take it up.
Okay.
And it might be one of you, right? If you're sure you want like this policy, but. But what I'm saying is they're not supposed to make any kind of policy decisions without writing in a draft and an RC.
Right. So nothing has been decided on archival links, for example. Right. If they wanted to make a policy, somebody would have to write a document there. It would need to get approved by them and by us.
Right.
And then it's a policy.
Right.
Just because somebody said this and then another in an email doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
So we have been discussing with the RPC and with Alexis how much the RPC or Alexis should be writing drafts here, because previously, of course, we had Heather who would write drafts, quite prolifically in order to address these things, and we've lost that particular model now. So, there's a little bit of a gap here if we rely on the community too much about these things. So that's why, we're discussing how much.
No, but I'm not sure. I mean, this is again our business or whatever, but it doesn't matter. I'm not sure that was the model that was intended. Like my expectation was always that like the RPC or Alexis or whatever would be active in writing draft because they have most of the expertise.
Oh, yes, I'm sure it was intended, yes, but we've just got to migrate to that position, that's all.
Yeah, but I mean, that's also, I really want to encourage you to do it because I think that's one of the reasons why there is so little progress in RSW at the moment, because nobody's picking up the pen for these small things. And like you would be really the most qualified person there or like group there to do this.
Right, understood. I guess my impression of it was that I needed to figure out what was policy that I needed to write an RFC about. So so he's saying yes and you're shaking your head, which to me is just kind of
it's
like
a little bit the other way around. At the point where you write it down, then the group can decide, do we want to pick it up? Is there a policy? And then like when they pick it up, then there should be a policy. Otherwise they should not be allowed to pick it up.
That's
But
quite
like
a heavy weight.
Yeah, that's
way
a
of doing
very
things.
heavy weight.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're not certain if it's policy, right? You don't want to write everything. But if you have a
Right.
desire that you need something that needs to be clarified, then you have to write it up first, and then the decision if there's a policy comes at the end, effectively. The final decision.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I'm pushing back though against the idea of writing an RFC before I've understood whether something is policy. What I think that we just talked about in the previous section is that now what we're suggesting is I would come to RSAB first, ask them to determine whether something is policy or not, basically, and then go to the write an RFC, submit it to RSWG, et cetera, if that is in fact
So there's
needed.
also this the side point about you don't want to put you generally don't want to bake any kind of operational practices into an RFC because you don't want to tie it down into an RFC too much. This is the lesson learned we have like with all our process documents, that we sometimes are at a point where you see like, oh, this process document says there has to be a web page under this link and this link doesn't exist anymore. These kind of things, right? That happens all the time. So this is like a general desire. So I think if you actually have something and you try to write it down in a way that you don't specify too much details in the in a document, and then there's nothing left, then there's no policy, right? If you actually can level it up to something that is useful without specifying the details, then there might be some policy.
Right. I mean, I thought that's what the email to the RSWG was. Me literally going, here's the concept of what I'm trying to do. None of it was specifically, okay, and we're going to use this system in this way. And, there weren't specifications.
So, yeah, I mean, like it sounds a little bit heavy, but a draft shouldn't be heavy. So like this happens if you send an email, everybody starts designing a system. If you write a draft, I think the feedback will be a little bit different, because then people actually comment about like, are the things that you've written down in the draft the right things to write down in the draft? And the draft can be actually sentences. Like there's no reason to have like very long documents or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with Pete about this yesterday, Alexis. I know you've had a conversation with him about this. I know he's had some further thoughts about how to draw the line a little bit. And this is I'm going to class this as startup cost of this process. Like we're just sort of learning a little bit here, and can I encourage you to go back to Pete on this one too, because I know he has further thoughts to help you out on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a conversation with him this afternoon.
Oh, good. So I'm encouraging you to do things that probably happened in the past tense.
Okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't have the perfect answer here. I'm just
No. It's fine. I think we're all just sort of trying to figure out how to make things move forward. So
yeah, it's startup costs. We'll break through the inertia, and probably in the next 6 months is my guess.
Okay, so moving to the next one, just an update on the GitHub experiments we've been doing. These are the most recent experiments. We originally planned to find documents to work with in XML, but we were asked to work in Markdown for these. So even though it's not Markdown, working in Markdown is not part of our current process, we did do that for these experiments. And we've done experiments with the IETF documents and we have one in process now that's from the IRTF stream. I guess I just wanted to make sure that all of the streams are agreeable, that they would like to possibly use GitHub at some point. My question is, do you want to, like, should we target your documents for experimentation so you can provide more input?
So I think I want to wait until this discussion later, because so the experiments now, they were sort of pretty. A particular process, and I think once we know a little bit more what that process looks like, we will have people that want to do this, right? So I see no signs that there's a desire to stop using GitHub on the IETF side. So quite the opposite. The question was whether we see continued interest from our streams in using GitHub for documents.
So for IAB, we have all our documents on GitHub. So, and if you think that one of these documents is actually easier to experiment with, I think we will be very open for it, because we have an IAB GitHub and we put all of them there.
So I can't click on the link there, but are those links into an RPC GitHub repo, or are they into some other GitHub repo?
RPC repo.
Okay.
So if you go there, you can look at the READMEs and see what the process was for these documents.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as long as you guys are comfortable in either Markdown or XML, depending on what the authors are using, I mean, I don't see a problem.
Are you interested in participating in a future experiment as an ISE?
If an author is, I'm happy with them. I'm happy to participate. If it advances the the efforts of the RPC, I don't see a problem with that either. As long as the authors are agreeable.
One quick question. So I think that was one of the kind of complaints, is that you create an own repo. And is the main reason for that because you want to have like a closed group working on this and not like a whole working group, or what's the reason? Okay.
It's partly that, but also what I found when we go look at those other repos, I have forked their repo, and sometimes there's like hidden instructions in there that surprise me. So, and I don't know how they work, if that makes sense.
Sorry, Miria, to understand this, you need to come to the session and see the presentation. There's a 15-minute presentation that explains the answer to that question. It's not something I can give simply now.
But
excuse me, Jay, just for a moment. I have to jump. I just want to wish all colleagues a very successful meeting. I'll see you guys later in the week.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
But I think what they would prefer is not even forking the repo, it's just working directly on the repo.
Yeah, and it's all covered in the presentation.
Okay.
There's a lot to it. So yeah,
I think a lot of the repos have code in them to generate bits of the RFC text, so it's not necessarily trivial to work with them.
Okay, so it's both. It's the concern about not having everybody involved and also technical barriers.
There are 5-6 pages of it. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I unfortunately can't come, but I will look at the slide.
Yeah, I mean, I also can't come to the meeting, but yes, I'm happy for you to continue these experiments on the IRTF stream, provided the authors are happy to participate.
Okay.
I certainly wouldn't want us to move to only doing this with GitHub, because not everyone uses GitHub, but for those that do, it seems useful.
Yeah, actually, is a desire to get like as much experience as possible, or do you want to keep it to like a few drafts here and there?
For the experiments?
Yeah.
I don't think we're set up to do as many drafts as possible at this point.
Because like, as I said, for IAB, I think all of them are an option, and you can take them all, or you can pick and choose on your own effectively.
Okay. Part of the reason I wanted to bring it up with the other streams, especially that haven't participated in the experiments yet, is partially to see if the notifications and the visibility into the changes are working for you. because you'll have to be paying attention to GitHub, right? To see if you approve the changes and whatnot.
We still get the auth48 emails there.
You will get an auth48 email that points you to saying the auth48 is initiated, and then it's a pointer to the repo.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sort of assuming that if there's anything that the stream manager needs to do, then there'll be an email comes to the stream manager says, you need to look at this change and approve it. Well, similarly for an AD in the IETF stream.
So what we've been doing is trying, well, if the area directors or whoever it is are paying attention, right, we may try to do like an app mentions or whatever and see if you approve there.
That works as well.
Okay.
I think if the person is on GitHub, then yes, you can mention it. So I think you shouldn't necessarily assume that they are on GitHub unless you know they are.
And then just so I make sure I understood correctly, it sounds like you envision that there will always be two auth48 paths. There will be the one path for the GitHub users and one path for people who don't use GitHub.
I mean, I don't envisage everyone to switch to using GitHub anytime soon. So I think you'll have to deal with both ways of doing this.
I don't know. I mean, this is a question far in the future, right? But like, even if there's not a GitHub yet, you can create a GitHub, and like, if we can configure the tooling such that it's very easy for people to see the changes, I think everybody can do it. So, but I don't think that's a question we need to answer right now.
So I would say that probably in the future we want to move to a web-based auth48 process rather than to an email-based auth48 process. And if GitHub ends up being a good tool for that, right, then maybe we will use GitHub for everything at some point, or maybe we will use something else. But I certainly hope we won't keep using email eventually.
Yeah, and I think there is definitely desire to have one process in the end and not multiple processes.
Yeah, I mean, that's our hope. I'm trying to understand what the expectations are from everyone else.
I think you're going to get pushback if you say everyone should use GitHub. There's a few authors who really don't like that.
I believe it.
There are some people who can't use GitHub as well. One or two Iranian people can't use it. So we just have to be careful about that. But hopefully we'll get to a position where it's like 95.5 or something like that.
It doesn't mean that you can't use GitHub, right? It just means like if somebody cannot access it, then you have to provide a way to export the information from your GitHub process and then like get it in on manually again. But it doesn't mean that you cannot internally use GitHub for your process.
Yeah, sure. I don't think we can assume that all of the authors are willing or able to use GitHub to respond to this process.
I would assume everybody's able because it's so easy these days, right? Willingness is a different thing.
I don't think it's true that everyone is able.
I mean, not everybody might have access. That's a real problem, right? But I'm pretty sure everybody who's working here is capable of doing it.
Okay. So just moving on, this one is just a plug for the session that's taking place on Thursday. It's great if you can join us and provide some of your viewpoints to help shape the next iteration of the experiment.
I guess, yep, this is mine. So we are moving our database and our workflow management into data tracker tech. And we should be seeing some prototypes before prod. So we do want to provide a dashboard for stream managers so they have a place where they can hit one screen and see everything that needs their attention in Auth48.
Okay. And this one is just the RFC editor related events that are taking place this week. And I really just want to suggest at this IETF, at most IETFs, it's usually just the three of us here that get to travel and meet the community. But at this IETF, most of our team is here. So if you stop by the desk, you can meet some of our other editors. That would be great. They're really excited to be here and meet the community. And
also, Priyanka Narkar is here. She's in the room, who's the programming for the RC Production Center over the past 10 plus years. It keeps our system running, and it's great to have her here this week also.
And then I threw this one in here the next one in here as a placeholder for Alexis's topic.
Yeah, okay, so this is about fixing broken links in older RFCs. We had Brian Carpenter did a just very brief experiment. He looked at some pre 8650 RFCs, 566 of them, and found 300 broken links. So if we're at like approximately one broken link for every two older RFCs, we would be looking at potentially thousands of broken links. One of the suggestions that we've seen is to use for how to fix these, if in fact we choose to do so, is to use the errata system for that. My concern, I think that solves some issues of like getting the appropriate people to look at the links and make sure that they're correct. My main concern, and the reason why I wanted to bring it to this group, is if we put thousands of errata into the system, what is that going to do to you and your processes? And that, I don't know if that's sustainable for people.
As the one with the big stream, right? Please don't use the current errata system for this because it's not working well.
Okay.
Right. So that process is just so painful to use. Right. The other suggestion I would make for the IETF stream, at least, is that you limit the ability to do this fixing of URLs to normative references, because informative references are not needed for the implementation of a specification by definition. Therefore, right, I think we can put the onus on the reader if they really want to figure out what this was to do some of their own research. For the normative ones, I would argue we should do it because they matter for implementers. The good news is that the normative ones are typically two other specifications that are sort of archival. And so we probably don't have a very big problem if you do that.
Oh, good.
So, but is that even the case here? So, like, we have this process that's for very obvious editorial errata. The RPC is just approving them. So, I would actually see this in the same category. Just put them in, approve them by the RPC, and you're done.
But she should say that the ADs need to approve them.
Yeah, and there's been a discussion about this as well, that that there are different types of problems here. So
yeah, okay, you have to verify if that's in
yeah,
living
so you have to
document.
you have to verify whether it's actually moved somewhere else, so that and it's a living one, so that if you used an
But that's
archive
also
one, you
something
do something wrong.
The RPC could assess in a lot of cases easily, and then just those where it's not clear, you can ask. That should limit the ones where you need approval to like a very small.
So are you saying we should do this for the informative ones also, or are you is this orthogonal to what I
So
said?
if the link is broken, right, means there's no web page anymore.
Well, that doesn't mean it didn't move somewhere, or that there isn't an archived copy of it.
Domain got bought by somebody. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in this case, it's not a living document. It's just completely. It's
I mean,
broken.
a lot of these are probably trivial things like the IEEE or the W3C or whoever will reorganize their websites and all IEEE standard whatever's URLs changed in a predictable way. And once we figured out that that's happened, we can just go through and fix them all. And it doesn't need anything complex. Yes, there are corner cases like living documents and so on, and different versions. But quite often, I suspect it will just be a mechanical rewrite.
True, but I mean, even for other specifications, right? The URL, the inclusion of the URL is basically a convenience to the reader, because the rest of the reference has the information to find the spec and the version of the spec.
Yep.
Because they're well maintained, right? So for those ones, I would even argue we could do what you just said, but we probably don't even have to, because people can just like by the other metadata find the spec. I think for me, the problem, ideally, I would like to reduce the problem to normative references that are basically only findable because of the URL, because they are, and there's probably ones that we actually did a special approval for, because you can't normally have a normative reference that's just a web page. So there shouldn't be very many of those. We have a few that we needed to do because some space or airspace thing is just a web page somewhere that everybody uses. So that's a suggestion, right? Whether this is what we're actually going to do, I don't know, but that it would reduce the problem significantly.
And my point was a little bit that I think this number of thousands that you have there if the RPC looks a little bit deeper into it, they will be able to like figure out that some of them are really straightforward and they don't need approval. So like if this tears down the number of documents or errata that needs approval to like a low number, then I don't see a problem. But you have to put the work in first. Okay. Yeah.
So the objection from Joel and possibly some others to using the errata process was that it needed broader community review of any of these things, and effectively virtually a last call thing about it. I haven't got the full text of the document, but
yeah. So again,
somewhere, but not.
Yeah, I think we're talking a little bit in the blue. I think we really need to know a little more what the links are and what the problem exactly is.
So there's a problem.
Sorry, his last message he accepted, so he's okay now. Sorry.
There's a lot of links, right? I mean, there's, for example, URLs with the author block. And I know that there's like a gazillion, like not a gazillion, but it's a bunch of documents that have like URLs that are my homepage that are not my homepage anymore. Right? And I think there's no value to fixing those. Right. So I think it's really sort of mostly the critical ones are the ones that are in normative references, and specifically those normative references you otherwise kind of can't.
But I mean, those ones, there is like a little value in fixing them if there's still an archive around that can point to it. But those are no-brainers, right? Those we can just replace. Nobody has to approve it.
Which are those ones now?
Like to your blog post or whatever. These can't be like anything normative or a living document.
Correct. So we should not bother.
No, we should just replace them. We should not bother the ADs with it.
Who finds my new homepage? Should the RPC then Google
It's not
around
your new homepage. We're going to an Internet Archive and use that link instead.
What if my thing is in the Internet Archive? It's
then we don't do anything.
Okay, so
that's what I understood, right?
I don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out, but that's certainly a possibility.
If we can automate it, I don't care. If it's manual, I want to limit it to really just the critical ones, because it's not like we don't have anything else to do.
Yeah, but if it's straightforward and there's like no consent, just do it.
If it's can be automated, I think this is sort of because there's so many of them. There's like literally like thousands. I actually gave Greg a while ago a list of URLs that are in the RFCs that are broken, and these are just the ones that point to IETF.org, IEB.org, RFC.org, and so on. And that was like several thousand long, right? This is just internal links that basically got inconsistent because we didn't do redirects or something like that. And if you look at all, I'm pretty sure the number is a lot larger. And we can't do anything manual for that sort of much. Even for hundreds, it's too much. It's going to cost the person a lot of time. It's 5 minutes per URL.
So you mean the RPC can't do it?
No, we can't pay for it to be done because it costs money, right, to do this.
We have to crowdsource it if we wanted to do it. No other way. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
So if I could say back what I think I just heard you say, Lars, normative references, if there are broken links, you would want there to be a review process. Anything that is non-normative, if we could do an easy replacement, that doesn't bother you, but you wouldn't want to have, an approval process in place for that.
No, so any replacement we should do needs to be correct, right?
Yes.
So and if we can establish that, right? If we can automatically get correct information, right? I don't do it for everything. I don't care. I don't think we can, right? And if we can't do that, so if somebody manually needs to verify that it's correct, I think we need to limit it somehow. And my suggestion how to limit it would be for the IETF stream for normative references only. The IRTF stream might be different because they have a bunch of things that are more like research papers, and they might have only informative references, and we might want to fix those, right?
Okay.
We would certainly need to fix the normative references in the IRTF stream because of things like Crypto Forum, that is basically standards.
Sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Sorry, we'd certainly have to fix the normative references in the IRTF stream because of things like the CFRG documents, which are essentially standards and are very widely referenced from the standards track.
Okay. Do you have any feelings about fixing non-normative links?
At best, on a best efforts basis. I mean, equally for the IETF stream, there are so few RFCs there, it isn't going to be the thing that takes all your time.
I would assume if you just look at the number of broken links for the IAB, it's a really small number.
Okay.
So we can potentially look at it, but like that's just my guess. That would be the information I need. How many links are broken on the IAB stream?
Okay. Does anybody else have any? What I'm hearing is I need to go back and find a way to do some homework about, finding just broken links in the normative references, trying to figure out if there are ways to automatically replace the links. Does the IAB even have very many to fix, et cetera, before I come back to have a further conversation, or we start actually just fixing?
You may want to talk to the RASPA-G, the RASPA, Research Analysis of Standards Processes Research Group, which is a research group looking at how the IETF processes work. And mostly they've been looking at the mailing lists, but I believe some of them are also looking at the RFCs, so that someone may have scripts to find all these broken links already. So it's at least worth asking.
Okay.
And then,
great.
And then, just let's keep in touch by email and let's try to move on.
Okay, I guess the other aspect to this is maybe more of an RSAB thing for the mailing list, but like, do we even want to do it, right? Like, we're back to that, like, we don't have to. In my experience, kind of just on the web in general, there's a reason why we go and fix references, because it increases the likelihood that people are actually going to use them.
So no, I think it was good that you raised it. And I actually think for the normative ones, right, it is actually a problem if you need to normatively refer to something else and you can't find it, right? And so there's actually a reason, the standards reason why we want to fix those, right?
Yes.
Other than just convenience to the reader.
Yeah, so I actually don't have a strong opinion about fixing this. Is a good point, but like sometimes people can just use Google and find it on their own or whatever. So, but like the one thing I would be more interested in is like actually our goal should be to have no broken links for normative references. So when we find broken links for normative references, we should understand why this is the case and how we can avoid this in future. That I think would be more important.
Typically, it's because the thing that we point to changed, right?
Yeah, but
somebody over there did something.
Yeah, but so like often they point to other SDOs and whatever, and of course they can change their web page or whatever. But maybe there is a way for like contacting the SDO and getting a more stable reference from them because we're just using the wrong reference or whatever. So maybe there is a way to fix it, but like we first have to understand.
The reference is not the URL, right? The reference is the metadata in the text. I mean, like you wrote papers before the web, right? Because maybe not, but sort of there was no URL that you included, and you still have all the other bibliographic information that you put there, so you can find it.
Yes,
by going to
so
the library.
That's like for normative references, I would expect there are very little URLs anyway. Yes. So in those cases where normative reference goes to a URL, like we are expecting, I think the RPC is even checking that there should be a very stable URL, and if it's not stable, we need to understand why.
So most normative references have a URL, but in most cases it's redundant with the metadata that's also
okay, but those we don't have to fix.
Well, we don't exactly, but we could, right? Because those are the ones that matter.
But those I don't see big value.
Sorry, I just heard an enormous extra piece of work just coming on the RPC's bit there, that they should check the stability of the normative reference URLs. I don't believe that. Is that something you do?
Yes. So we check the stability, but what that means is, pardon me, is it a URL to something like ACM versus somebody's blog post somewhere or a personal website? So we assess it by, is this a ongoing concern business-wise or SDO? And if it's not, we ask the authors if they can provide a more stable reference, because sometimes authors trying to get around paywalls for papers will say, oh, go look at Joe's home website because he's got the preprint PDF. and we ask, we're like, could we have a better, URL for that? And sometimes the authors are like, nope, that's the one we want to use. Like, well, okay, it works now. So,
and
but we push-
if you can't push back, if they refuse, then you just go with the original one.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yes.
So does that match your expectations? Yeah, great.
And actually, if there is like a...
I want to interject something real quick. If during that process, the author said, no, I really want to use Joe's homepage, is it acceptable for the RPC to say, can we archive Joe's homepage and link to an archival link instead? Right, like it as a way of trying to future-proof the fact that Joe's homepage is more likely to change than something like a standards organization.
That's also something you need to ask the authors in the AD, because it might be on purpose that the reference should change.
Right, I just said they could ask, but is that
they
an
could
acceptable practice?
An acceptable practice if we need it,
That would be a policy decision, I think, whether we
Okay.
want to future-proof URLs to and basically use archival versions rather than not do so.
And just quickly about the practice that's currently, so if there's a DOI number, usually you don't put the URL as well, right?
We do.
We do? Oh, okay.
Yes. And well, and also if you include the DOI, but without a URL, the way the XML works, it constructs a URL using the DOI.
Yeah, I think we need to wrap up. Thank you.
Can you close the meeting? Can we? Oh, okay.